Alright, so Dragon Knight matchups. I'm just get right into this. Alright, so first up we have Berserker. So Berserker is kind of a neutral monster, especially against someone like Dragon Knight who's already sort of struggling because she has smaller buttons. Her only really outstanding neutral button is JS. But Berserker has really good ability to get in on her in the neutral, especially if he does get Frenzy. He's got moves like 5M the suck. He's also got an extremely good jump in with JB. He's got 5B and the second hit of 5B while on Frenzy. There's all around just got really good buttons to advance on Dragon Knight, making her very scared to contest him in any way. And because he has such good advancing neutral, he gets Dragon Knight blocking very often. And Dragon Knight not having the best of buttons to contest him with makes it very hard for her to get out of block with Berserker, which means Berserker can advance pressure a lot, he can go for guard break a lot, and Dragon Knight can't really do much. Even her guard cancel is pretty small, so it'll sometimes whiff if Berserker is spacing himself right. But one mistake and Dragon Knight can basically make Berserker explode before it, even just one touch, just kill Berserker because he uses his own life as a resource. But yeah, I think these two, it's kind of hard to say where he goes in the matchup chart. Let me ask NA's best Berserker real quick. Let me ask Hubert what he thinks about this. Yo, Hubert, where do you think Berserker goes in the matchup tier list, huh?
Yeah, such a good matchup for Berserker.
Well, y'all heard it here. Putting him right there. So we have Grappler, one of DNF Duel's resident villains. This matchup's really interesting. Both have a very decent way of maneuvering and spacing each other out in the neutral. And they both have a very similar game plan where they want to get one or the other blocking or knocked down, so that the way they can make you guess for game with their very oppressive offense. And both can kill you in essentially 2 touches because they both have insane amount of damage. They basically want to make the other have an as uninteractive game as possible by just completely snowballing the round. So essentially whoever gets started first can just take the whole round fairly easily with the momentum. I can see an argument for slightly Dragon Knight favored because she does have a slightly better time in neutral, I'd say, but I think Grappler does have really good options, especially when he gets white health in this matchup that I think is even. Yeah, war crime. So Inquisitor in this matchup isn't all that scary, really. I'd say it's slightly Dragon Knight favored, maybe even 6-4, somewhere in between here. But yeah, Inquisitor has like decent neutral, but none of it is really threatening because she has no mix. She's not doing a ton of guard damage outside of Awakening. Meanwhile, Dragon Knight is threatening mix and guard break, and even basic combos can make Inquisitor absolutely explode. The main thing in this matchup you gotta look out for is Inquisitor's JM, which is an absolute crime of a button. Like, they knew what they were doing when they named it as well. They named it God's Wrath. Like, just take a look at this button, and the fact that it's only -3 on block is absolutely insane. But yeah, Inquisitor does have the ability to hold her ground in the neutral space, but she is slightly outclassed by Dragon Knight, so yeah, slightly advantaged. So now Striker, another one of the resident villains of DNF Duel. I'm gonna put her slightly Dragon Knight advantage. It can easily also be put in even, but Dragon Knight does have a lot of tools, especially in the neutral space, that make it really difficult for Striker to get in and get her win condition. I don't like seeing these two right next to each other. I'm putting you up here. Striker can get blown up very easily if she's not careful when approaching Dragon Knight, specifically by Dragon Knight's JS or 5B. Can punish a lot of Striker's approaching options, and Dragon Knight gets rewarded very heavily for hitting these buttons. But when Striker does get in, it's extremely oppressive and really difficult to deal with the rebeat pressure. And if you decide wrong, if you make a bad choice, Striker will blow you up for a decent chunk of your health, especially because Dragon Knight has lower HP. But reversely, Dragon Knight also has really strong pressure, especially against Striker. And because Striker doesn't have a really good answer for calling out Astra, she has to commit usually, and if Dragon Knight gets the right call, she gets a really good hit and you end up taking a ton of damage and blowing up. Next on the matchup list, we got Ranger. until Ranger realizes that he can actually point his guns upwards at the sky. It's 6-4. Next up is Hitman. I hate this character. He's so overtuned. He's got such good buttons. He gets rewarded so hard for any straight hit. And he just has such good options against all of Dragon Knight's pressure, and it's just awful. Just look at this.
There's one opportunity. This is a round to the wire. Locked on. Pause. Oh, like, yeah, for sure, but it's scary. The awakening here. Cancel.
This is a 4-6 matchup, but you can instant overhead him, so 4.5, 5.5. Alright, so next up is the Vanguard matchup. I used to originally think this was heavily Dragon Knight favored. I would 7-3, 6-4. But now after playing a couple of really good Vanguard players, I'm gonna put this in slightly Dragon Knight favored only. Vanguard does have a pretty good time at suppressing Dragon Knight into neutral. He can make it a little scary for her to approach at times, but the problem is that Vanguards have to over rely on 5B a lot because it's their only consistent anti-air they can use against Dragon Knight's air options. And because they over rely on 5B a lot, because they have to, you can kind of abuse this because Vanguard 5B is really minus on whiff, and it's not that hard to roll either. And then when you do get in on Vanguard, he has very slow buttons, so it's nearly impossible for Vanguard to shake Dragon Knight off. But yeah, this Vanguard is just lacking in a lot of tools and options to use against Dragon Knight, so slight Dragon Knight advantage. So now for Kunoichi, I think this is honestly very Dragon Knight favored, 6-4, I'd say. It's just, a lot of what Kunoichi's tools and what she wants to do, Dragon Knight can just use that against her. Like a ton of Kunoichi's air mobility and her bait she tries to do by double jumping in the air, Dragon Knight can just swat her out the air with DP because of how high it hits. And also Kunoichi tries to zone you with kunais, like just let it hit you. It's gonna give you, you're gonna have white health, and then all of a sudden you're winning neutral now with white health. And then you have a 5-frame button too, so Kunoichi staggers are not as oppressive as they would normally be because you have one of the fastest Abaras in the game. You can mash them pretty decently. And this, with the fact that she's low HP, you absolutely blow her up when you're already winning in neutral and on defense, kind of. It's just honestly, Kunoichi has to play out of her mind to win games against Dragon Knight. All right, next up, Crusader, the Holy Man. So originally, a lot of people consider this a really difficult, bad matchup for Dragon Knight, like heavily losing. And even still now, I see a lot of Dragon Knights having difficulty in saying this is a really tough matchup for Dragon Knight. But I actually think this is slightly in her favor. You do have to play this matchup very differently. You can't do normal autopiloting Dragon Knight stuff like abusing air, JS, and all that, because Crusader has wall and 5S, which will just absolutely crush you if you're using the air too much. And a lot of people get uneasy and scared to play the ground game against Crusader, but it's actually, playing on the ground against Crusader is really not that bad. You do have the tools to sort of, you do have really fast dash-ins and runs, and dash blocking is, efficient dash blocking is really good in this matchup. Because when you do find your way in, it is very difficult for Crusader to get Dragon Knight off of her, and Dragon Knight has stuff like instant overheads and really good block strings against Crusader because he has a large body. Plus in this matchup, you're going to be getting white health a lot because Crusader is usually spacing you out with buttons, poking you out with spears or walls, and giving you a lot of access to white health. So that really, having good use of conversion makes this matchup a hell of a lot better. And really, Crusader has to work really hard to win against Dragon Knight, getting a lot of hits, calling out a lot of stuff, when Dragon Knight really doesn't have to be right that often in order to kill Crusader because of her high damage and high reward. So yeah, slightly Dragon Knight favored. So now Ghostblade. This is easily Dragon Knight's worst matchup. He can just oppress Dragon Knight so well in the neutral. Dragon Knight can't use any of her air mobility options like JS or air dashing because Ghostblade's JA is so good at stuffing them out and hitting her out of any air option she tries to use, and then he can convert off into a full combo, and then all of a sudden you now have to be blocking Ghostblade pressure. So then this forces Dragon Knight to have to play on the ground, which is also one of Ghostblade's strengths in this matchup, because Dragon Knight doesn't have good counter poke. She doesn't have the range to really whiff punish any of Ghostblade's move either. So Ghostblade has a really risk-free neutral against her, whereas Dragon Knight has to put a lot of risk or a lot of commitment into getting in on Ghostblade. And then even when Dragon Knight does get in and gets Ghostblade blocking, Ghostblade has some of the best ways to deal with Astra against Astra pressure and resets. Mainly because he has really good buttons that prevent you from jumping in on him, and it can hit Astra and Dragon Knight at the same time. Dragon Knight's best bet in the matchup is just to try to cheese a way in with white health, but that's pretty difficult in this matchup as well. And so Dragon Knight just has a really hard time here because she has to commit, and it risks a lot anytime she tries to interact with Ghostblade. So yeah, 4-6 in Ghostblade's favor. So next up we have Launcher. Word of advice: don't. So now we got Troubleshooter here. I would originally put this guy in slightly Dragon Knight advantage, but I'm gonna put him in even. And for one reason and one reason only. There is one button that Troubleshooter has that makes this matchup, that makes the neutral so difficult for Dragon Knight. And that is 5B. Troubleshooter is 5B. It's like, this button keeps me up at night with how good it is in the matchup. Dragon Knight is so hard for Dragon Knight to try to jump up or try to go for jump-ins because of this button. It's so good against Astra pressure. It's just an all-around crazy button that just makes the neutral so difficult for Dragon Knight. This plus Troubleshooter is like 2S. It can make it really hard for Dragon Knight to get in. Troubleshooter has a really good time of keeping her out, but Troubleshooter does have some difficulty dealing with JS and Dragon Knight's full screen moves. So she's kind of able to balance it back to her side in the neutral by playing very passive and very safe with the JS. That plus the fact Troubleshooter isn't too threatening. He doesn't have a lot of guard damage. He doesn't really have any mix if you don't let him get drink off for free. And then he doesn't have that much damage outside of Awakening. But this is a very back and forth matchup, so I'll have it in even. So now we have Swiftmaster. This is probably going right next to Ghostblade in 4-6. A little bit easier than Ghostblade, but still so oppressive for Dragon Knight. So I know not that long ago I tweeted a matchup list where I put Swiftmaster in even. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what I was on, but this is not even. Definitely not. This is 100% a 4-6 matchup, but not even. It's Swiftmaster advantage. This is one of those characters where you sort of can't, if they play this matchup completely right, then you don't get to play as Dragon Knight at all. Like, God forbid you try to use the air in this matchup, because Swiftmaster has the cracked button of 5S to just demolish any sort of air approach you try to do, along with stuff like Orb and 5MS to basically make a wall. And then playing on the ground is so difficult against this character as well, because he can outrange you so well, and you have to basically wait for him to overcommit before you can do anything. You cannot play this matchup proactively at all. You have to play it reactively completely to Swiftmaster. That and the fact that Swiftmaster probably has the second best options against Astra as well, a lot right behind Ghostblade. His 5A is absolutely crazy for defense. Being it such a fast and large button just destroys Astra pressure. Your best bet in this matchup is to just play really passive with JS and neutral jump, and maybe cheese out some knockdowns with 6MS. But for the most part, you're going to be struggling the majority of this matchup. So yeah, 4-6 Swiftmaster favored. So next up is Enchantress, definitely 6-4 in favor of Dragon Knight. And yeah, Enchantress can't really carry out her game plan of trying to zone you out with her fireballs and then try to get the puppet on you and try to start some offense, because Dragon Knight can just out zone her with JS and 6M. So the neutral is just kind of perma struggling for Enchantress. She can't really get in. When she does get in, her pressure is alright, but she has to usually commit a lot of mana or find some way to get in with conversion and vines. But for the most part, Dragon Knight can just negate her entire neutral with JS. And then Dragon Knight also makes Enchantress explode because of high damage. So yeah, not favorable for Enchantress at all. So now Lost Warrior, This is also not favorable at all for him. Dragon Knight just kind of just should destroy this matchup. He does have the insane amount of damage he gets, but if you're getting hit by Lost Warrior, it's kind of your fault, because everything he does is so preventable just by holding the guard button. Like, you should not be really getting anywhere with how easy it is to avoid his damage. That and the fact that you can instant overhead is just it's not a fun time for Lost Warrior. It's really not. Effective dash blocking, using your Y health well, and then you can instant overhead him. It's not 6-4, definitely Dragon Knight favored. All right, now I'm going to order the list and make slight adjustments. So this is going to be the final matchup chart for Dragon Knight. Top left being the easiest with Launcher, then Lost Warrior, and hardest being Ghostblade, then Swift Master. If anyone has any questions about this or disagrees with me in any way, too bad, you can fight me. And hopefully I gave some insight about Dragon Knight matchups. So yeah, I'm out. Laters.